Oh, hello, great readers. I'm Belchan.
I'm Nimakung.
I'm Banchan.
In this class, I'll read to all of you a part of Great Expectations.
As.
Great Expectations. Charles Dickens. Chap. 5 Sec 2. Arid conditions. As when something moist was going. His men resumed their muskets and fell in. Wister. Walter. Joe. And I. Received strict charge to keep in the rear, and to speak no word after we reached the marshes. Business. I treasonably whispered to Joe. I hoped. Joe. We shan't find them. And Joe whispered to me. I'd give a shilling if they had cut and run. We were joined by no stragglers from the village, for the weather was cold and threatening. The way dreary. The footing badged. Darkness coming on. And the people had good fires indoors and were keeping the day. A few faces hurried to glowing windows and looked after us, but none came out. We passed the finger post and held straight onto the churchyard. There we were stopped a few minutes by a signal from the sergeant's end, while 2 or 3 of his men dispersed themselves among the graves and also examined the porch. They came in again without finding anything, and then we struck out on the open marshes, through the gate at the side of the churchyard. I bittersly came rattling against us here on the east wind, and Joe took me on his back. Been within 8 or 9 hours and had seen both men hiding. I considered for the first time, with great dread, if we should come upon them. Would my particular convict suppose that it was I who had brought the soldiers there? He had asked me if I was the deceiving imp. Hunt against him. Would he believe that I was both imp and hound and treacherous earnest, and had betrayed him? It was of no use asking myself this question now. There I was, on Joe's back, and there was Joe beneath me, charging at the ditches like a hunter, and stimulating Mr. Wopsle to tumble on his Roman nose, and to keep up with us. The soldiers were in front of us, extending into a pretty wide line with an interval between men and men. We were taking the course I had begun with, and from which I had diverged in the mist. Either the mist was not hurt again yet, or the wind had dispelled it. Under the low red glare of sunset, the beacon, and the gibbet, and the mound of the battery, and the opposite shore of the river were plain, though all of a watery lead colour, with my heart thumping like a blacksmith at his broad shoulder. I looked all about for any sign of the convicts. I could see none. I could hear none. Mr. Wopsle had greatly alarmed me more than once by his blowing and hard breathing, but I knew the sounds by this time, and could dissociate them from their objective pursuit. I got a dreadful start when I thought I heard the file still going, but it was only a ship bell. The ship stopped in their eating and looked timidly at us, and the cattle, their heads turned from the wind and sleet, stared angrily as if they held us responsible for both annoyances. But, except these things, and the shudder of the dying day in every blade of grass, there was no break in the big stillness of the marshes. The soldiers were moving on in the direction of the old battery, and we were moving on a little way behind them. And all of a sudden, we all stopped, for there had reached us on the wings of the wind and rained a one shout. It was repeated. It was at a distance towards the east, but it was long and loud. Then, confusion in the sound. To this effect, the sergeant and the nursemen were speaking under their breath, when Joe and I came up. After another moment's listening, who was a good judge agreed, and Mr. Wopsle, who was a bad judge, agreed. The sergeant, a decisive man, ordered that the sound should not be answered, but that the course should be changed, the right way the east was, and it pounded away so wonderfully that I had to hold on tight to keep my seat. It was a run indeed now, and what Joe called, in the only two words he spoke all the time, a winder, down banks and up banks, and over gates, and splashing into dikes, and breaking among coarse rushes. No man cared where he went. As we came nearer to the shouting, it became more and more apparent that it was made by more than one voice. Sometimes it seemed to stop altogether. Then the soldier stopped. When it broke out again, the soldiers made for it at a greater rate than ever, and we after them. After a while, we had so run down that we could hear one voice calling murder and another voice, convicts, runaways, guard, a struggle, and then would break out again. And when it had come to this, the soldiers ran like dare, and Joe too. The sergeant ran in first. When we had run the noise quite down, and two of his men ran in close upon him. Their pieces were cocked and levelled, and we all ran in. Here are both men, panted the sergeant, struggling at the bottom of a ditch. Surrender, you two, and confound you for two wild beasts. Water was splashing, and mud was flying, and oaths were being sworn, and blows were being struck, when some more men went down into the ditch to help the sergeant, and dragged out, separately, my convict and the other one. Both were bleeding and panting and execrating and struggling. But of course I knew them both directly. Mind, said my convict, wiping blood from his face with his rugged sleeves, and shaking torn hair from his fingers. I took him. I give him up to you. It's not much to be particular about, said the sergeant. It'll do you small good. Aye, man. Being in the same plight yourself, I don't expect it to do me any good. Convict, with a greedy laugh. I took him. He knows it. The other convict was livid to look at. And then, in addition to the little bruised left side of his face, seemed to be bruised and torn all over, He could not so much as get his breath to speak, until they were both separately handcuffed, but leaned upon a soldier to keep himself from falling. Take notice. Guarda tried to murder me were his first words. Tried to murder him, said my convict, disdainfully. Try it. And not do it. I took him and give him up. That's what I done. I not only prevented him getting off the marshes, but I dragged him this far on his way back. He's a gentleman, if you please. This villain. Then, the house has got its gentleman again. To me. Murder him? With my will. To murder him. The other one still gasped. He tried to murder me. Look here, said my convict to the sergeant. Single-handed I got clear of the prison ship. I made a dash and I done it. I could have got clear of these death cold flats like was to look at my leg. There. To be continued.